Hello, I'm Paul Michelman, Director of Content for Harvard Business Digital, and our guest today is John Boudreau, Professor at USC's Marshall School of Business and co-author of Beyond HR, The New Science of Human Capital. John, thanks for joining the program.
It's a pleasure, Paul.
So, John, in your work, you emphasize the need to improve the quantity and/or the quality of talent where it makes the most difference in an organization. So implied here, it seems, is a two-step process. First, you need to determine where talent has the biggest impact. And second, you need to figure out how to improve the quantity or the quality of that talent. So first things first, how do we determine where changes in talent practices in the organization would potentially have the biggest effect?
Well, that's a big question. Obviously, there's a great deal of analysis that goes on to connect business processes or strategy to talent. What we describe in the book and what we've found is that it's very helpful to break it down into its components. So strategy questions often revolve around how we compete, what makes us different, how we're going to protect that difference, and how we create value. With that in place, we can begin to drop down and think about processes, resources, and other supporting elements. So we can ask things like, if this process is critical, where's the bottleneck in that process? What's pivotal in that process? If we have a resource, we can ask ourselves, is it about getting more, or is it about protecting the resources we have, or is it about making them more valuable? Those strategic pivot points are really important as the basis for understanding where talent might make the big difference. For example, if you think about Disneyland, the high-level strategy is surprising and delighting customers, and I think everyone would agree on that. But at that level, we can't really say where the pivot points are in talent or strategy. Turns out Disney does a lot of things well. But one of the things that everyone says could be improved is waiting in line. It's a bottleneck. It's a place where there's a great pivot point for Disney. So the talent that might be most pivotal at Disney might be the talent or the organization that could make a difference to waiting in line.
Okay, so when I went to Disney, which I've been to now a few times, much to my chagrin, my daughter gets most surprised and delighted when she sees Goofy or Mickey Mouse. Are they pivotal?
Well, it's an interesting question. They're very important. Mickey Mouse, we could say, is the franchise for Disney. But for a strategic leader, a manager of the park or a senior leader, a better question is what's pivotal. So the real question is interesting. How much difference would we make improving the performance of Mickey Mouse versus improving the performance of some other talent pool that might be more pivotal?
Okay. So in thinking about our own organizations, how do we as managers figure out who those pivotal people are? What are the questions we ask to determine that?
So I think the first question is to ask what's pivotal in our processes or in our strategy. And it's surprising how infrequently leaders understand the need to make that connection. Everybody wants to dive right to the human resource practices. I need a new incentive system. I need better recruiting. I need a succession planning system. It's the language of HR. It's our practices. So for leaders outside of HR, one of the first things they need to do is to think about what is pivotal in the process or the business or the resources that I manage here. Then they can start to say, where could talent improvements make the biggest difference right there?
Should this process involve employees themselves? Should I go around interviewing my employees to try to figure out just how pivotal they are?
Well, you bet. Not only to figure out how pivotal they are, but one of the big points we make in the book is to figure out how pivotal they might be. Employees see lots of places they can be pivotal that leaders, even managers close to those employees, might not see. One of the great things about the human resource field is we've developed some pretty sophisticated control systems, things like job descriptions, etc. Increasingly, in fast-changing organizations with global competition, as strategies change, the nature of the pivotal elements of the job change. And when that happens, it's often employees that have insights into how they could be more pivotal to the organization. One quick example, I do some work with the United States Navy. The head of HR for the Navy talks about when ensigns become essential. Now, the Navy has been very good for decades at warfighting, and they know everything about how to take 18-year-olds and help them to move planes around a carrier deck, how to help them to use their weapons in a warfighting situation. But the head of HR has talked to these folks and said an ensign increasingly becomes essential when they're on the streets of Baghdad or Afghanistan, when they're interacting with a local population or coalition forces, and when they're on camera with CNN. The question for the Navy is, how much of that stuff is in our job description for this individual? They know a lot about warfighting. It continues to be fundamentally important, but pivotalness is shifting toward hearts and minds and toward what we might call ambassadorship on the street, even for someone like an ensign.
Okay. So let's say, for the sake of our discussion, that we've achieved point A, which is to determine who are those pivotal people. How now do we develop them? What steps should we be taking? Do they get special treatment?
I think they do, and it's interesting. You want to focus your treatment on what's pivotal now. So indeed, when you look at, let's say, a sweeper at Disney, cleaning is really, really important. But cleaning is also something that's pretty well engineered and worked out at Disney. It's fundamentally critical, but the difference between worst cleaning and best cleaning at Disney may not be very big. So you may not need a lot of performance incentives, for example, about cleaning. On the other hand, answering a customer's question properly, helping a family find a shady spot to watch the parade at just the right moment, those are things that happen on the fly. In those areas, sweepers may vary a lot in terms of their performance. So yes, we want to aim our investments at the pivot points. That means we probably do things differently for sweepers than we do for Mickey Mouse. And it probably means that we aim our performance incentives and our performance management to those places where performance really makes a difference, and not just do it everywhere for everyone.
Okay. So how do we continue to shepherd the development of our pivotal players, of our pivotal people, our sweepers, without inhibiting their development, without forcing them to stay in a role that they might want to grow out of? Say I'm a sweeper, but I want to play Mickey Mouse.
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, and I think at some point, clarity about what's pivotal and what's important and what's high valued is very helpful in those discussions. It's an interesting paradox. If you're at Disney and you say, I want to serve our guests in a way that gives me a lot of discretion and a lot of chance to make decisions, the answer might be, we need to get you out of the Mickey Mouse costume and on the street as a sweeper. That seems counterintuitive. Obviously, Mickey Mouse is so important. It's important that sweepers understand that we're moving them to pivot points. What Disney does is it often offers sweepers the chance to work in the stores. Sweeper supervisors get the chance to sit in on park design meetings so that the supervisors tell the park designers all the things that sweepers are encountering on the street that might make the park better. So there are pivot points all along the development path, and when you're lucky, they actually build on the pivot points that were earlier in your career. Sweepers on the street are helping customers seeing things no one else sees. When they become sweeper supervisors, part of their job is to help park designers understand that and build better parks because of it.
So it sounds like when you develop or when you uncover a pivot point in your organization that was unexpected, you might have to do some readjusting of people's preconceived notions about what roles are important and what aren't.
Not just preconceived notions, but it often goes right to the heart of our structure. So if you're an organization that's traditionally defining sweeper jobs as more custodial, and you look at the difference between how you might pay or develop or train Mickey Mouse as opposed to sweepers, and you're missing this hidden pivotalness, well, it's a very big change in virtually everything you do about sweepers, from their job description to the way they're recruited, to the way they're selected, to the way they're appraised and rewarded.
Okay. John Boudreau, thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.